Hey everybody, welcome to another book review. This time we're doing the 8th edition book, and Colin's going to sit here with us. And I apologize for my very squeaky chair. I hope it is not distracting. We're going to go over the lores of Magic and review them. We're not going to cover every spell because you guys know these are the basic lores.
Right.
We're going to talk about how powerful are all these lores. We're going to go through one at a time. And basically, we've discussed this in great lengths today.
Totally.
About, what we feel about the lores of Magic.
Indeed. It was totally not an hour-long video recorded without audio.
No, totally not. This is totally not the second time we're recording this thing.
Not at all.
So we're going to talk about what we feel about every lore, and basically I want to explain to you that how we feel about these nowadays is different than how we feel about this 5 years ago, because we would have ranked these spell lores best to worst or something like that. We don't see them that way. They're all very utilitarian, and they fill roles for your army, and they do things for your army that your army can't do. There's not the best lore, though. Lore of Death is the best lore.
Yeah.
Lore of Life is super defensive, but like, yeah.
And the fact that not every lore has access to every single one of these. Some armies have access to more of them. Some armies have less. So it's very army dependent, and some synergize better with certain play styles. So it's very much kind of like a I don't know. There's some synergy to be chosen with lore and.
We're going to start with Lore of Fire. We're going to go down the rule book with them as they are in the book, right?
Yep.
So Lore of Fire was often or long thought of as the weakest lore. I don't necessarily agree with that. It is often overlooked.
Yes.
This is a lore that has a lot of direct damage or a lot of magic missiles, ways of doing damage to your opponent, chaff clearing, all that kind of stuff. Its average spell cast value is not that high. And it does have some utilitarian type spells.
Right. There's 2 different magic missiles, 2 different direct damages, and then a couple augments and a hex.
So their signature spell is unique because it is a direct damage spell with 3 levels. It's Fireball. You can do D6 strength 4 hits, 2D6 strength 4 hits, or 3D6 strength 4 hits. It itself is a low-level signature spell, and a medium spell, and a decent nuke spell.
Right, a lot of those signature spells, some of them increase their damage output, some increase their range. This one does both, and then has that third stop. So if you really, really need to kill something, being able to just put 3d6 shots into it is at 48-inch range, so you can pretty much hit anything on the table. It's a lot of utility for one spell.
The Lore of Fire does have its own. They all have their own signature. Sorry, not signature. Lore attribute. Theirs is called Kindle Flame. Basically, it's easier to set things on fire if it's already burning. Apparently, so if you cast a Lore of Fire spell damage on a unit, the next Lore of Fire damage spell on that unit will get an additional D3 to its casting value total when you cast that spell. It's not that useful of a lore attribute. I find I'm often using this lore to hit multiple different things. Rarely the same thing over and over again.
Right. It's tough because usually your opponent's going to dispel the first one you cast. So you're not going to get that chaining.
My thing is, if you keep hitting the same thing over and over again, you got the wrong lore. Because you have other lores have big nuke spells to deal with a big unit. If you have to keep hitting the same thing over and over again, it's just the wrong lore.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't like
Fireball
that much.
Is probably the best to cascade that Kindle Flame though. Being able to put the little fireball in it and then chain it with some of the other ones, or the other way around. Because then we're going to put up Flaming Sword of Ruin.
So fire doesn't just have direct damage.
Magic missiles.
This is a massive buff spell. +1 to wound is so good. It is only cast on an 24-inch range. It gives you magical and the flaming attack special roll.
So not a lot of things, but ethereal and regen could make a huge difference.
A little bit of buffing. Now, one spell that is arguably, it's not the best spell in the game, but it is a fantastic utility spell. I want this every time I play with Lore of Fire.
Fulminating Flame Cage.
So you do a little bit of damage to them?
Yeah, a little bit of damage, and you want to move? You got to take more damage for every model in the unit that moves. You gotta take a strength 4 hit.
Yeah, so I mean, look at you. It's cast on what, an 11 with a 24-inch range.
Yeah,
it's gonna do a little bit of damage.
It's at least gonna give you that D6 strength 4.
What do you use it for? Is you're about to get charged by something? They might not want to move. They might not. If they move, they're gonna take a strength 4 hit.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna, like, if they reform, they take it again. If they overrun, they take it again.
Yeah.
Like it stops you in its place. Like
they fail the charge. They fail the charge and take it. Like it's huge.
We often talk. We're gonna get the next lore, Curse of Vanya here. People have often heard me say that's my favorite spell in the game, or it's one of my favorite spells in the game. I actually think Fulminating Flame Cage is a better version of it.
I can see that. I can see that now.
Curse of Anahir, well, it doesn't matter. We'll get to the next one.
Yeah, I would argue that the -1 to hit for Curse of Anahir makes it. I like it a little bit better because it makes it more of a utility for actually in combat. But this has the potential of doing way more damage to a big unit.
Its big nuke spell is called Flamestorm.
Which
It's
for
not
a nuke
that
spell,
big. It's medium. It's like what? It's like a worse version of Skaven Scorch.
yeah.
But it's easy to cast. 13 to cast. Small round.
Scatters
template.
D6, Strength 4.
It can neuter a unit. It can neuter a unit.
You can also upcast it to 16 to cast, and it'll scatter 2d6, but it's a large blast, so, you know, has the ability to do a lot of damage. And again, as you see, everything's doing a little bit of damage, which could trigger your Kindle Flame. Not the best lore attribute, but hey, you're going to get additional casting. Like, I'm not going to complain about it.
This is lore, like I said earlier, widely considered the weakest, the least interesting, the most overlooked. I think it is actually quite usable, and we've been using it more and more in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think this one and then another lore going forward are probably one of the best for like beginners if you're playing Warhammer Fantasy. It's a really good, like, this is just an easy way to play the Magic phase without too much craziness.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but you also argue that we saw more value in it once we became extreme veterans, right? You can other lores have like zany things or more control or whatever. This is a little bit more basic, but like
one-dimensional, I guess.
Yeah, it's gonna throw fire at you one way or another. So it looks one-dimensional, but then with the Flaming Sword of Ruin, Fulminating Flame Cage, I don't think this is a bad lore. I can't rank them. It's not the worst lore, but I can't say which one is. I think it is actually quite a useful lore.
Yep. Moving on. After the lore of fire is the lore of beasts, which has some really, really cool stuff with it, but also has probably one of the worst lore attributes.
It's the worst lore.
One of, I think.
It's a really bad lore attribute.
It is.
So basically, if you cast any lore of beast spells on beasts, war beasts, horses, chariots, monsters, anything in Beasts of Chaos,
chariots,
it reduces the difficulty of the spell by 1. That's almost meaningless. Like, if it gives you +1 to the casting value, that's significantly better or useful.
It actually makes it harder.
Situationally, like, you can't control this at all.
Right, at least +1 to cast makes it harder for your opponent to dispel. This makes it easier to get it off, sure, but how often do you fail by 1 occasionally, but that's a lot more on the bigger spells. And even their biggest spell was only a 16 to cast. It's not the 21.
The lore of beasts, while it may have the worst, or at least arguably one of the worst attributes, has arguably one of the best signature spells.
We got Wyson's Wild Form, +1 strength and toughness.
10 to cast, range of 12. Extend the range to 24 with 13 to
good
cast.
on offense, good on defense.
It's one of the highest value signature spells.
It's only 10 to cast. It's a little expensive for a signature,
you're
but
taking
for what it does.
Beasts, and this spell's taken every time.
Yeah.
So if you're choosing Lore of the Beasts, I like it with Lizardmen can take this with their skinks. I like this lore attribute, this signature spell. I love it with the Bretonians. It just really fills not a niche, but like your knights are toughness 3. If you want to focus on close combat, Lore of Beasts is actually really, really quite good.
Right.
It has some downsides, like pen and pen. I'm not going to show it, but like, okay, let's talk about
the Amber Spear.
That's the one. It fills a niche that an army like my Bretonians wouldn't have. You
need a War Machine? Well, you don't need a War Machine when you got the Amber Spear, which is a casting value of 9, range 24. It's a strength 6, D3 multiple wounds, bolt thrower shot essentially. Penetrates ranks, and you can upcast it if you really want to for a strength 10, D6, so it becomes a cannon.
I want this spell every time I roll Lore of Beast. I may not need to cast it every time, but I want this in my utility build. Now, a spell that I don't always want to have, but I found to be quite useful with Beasts, especially if you're doing some sort of Death Star or, say, again, Bretonia, a lot of these lores are better for certain armies than others.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of characters in one unit, you can upcast Savage Beast, get a bunch of extra attacks and strength, and really do a lot of damage. Now, there are probably better ways to throw dice in the game, but like that could really beef you up. I mean, you've charged, and you know whether or not you need to cast it.
Yes.
But your opponent knows that you charged or you made the charge and whether or not they needed to dispel it.
Yeah.
Now,
I think there's 2 other spells we got to talk to here.
I think I know exactly which 2.
We got to talk about the Curse of Anahir.
This has been widely one of my favorite spells for a long time.
I would argue like this.
But Fulminating Flame Cage is, I think, overtaking it a little bit.
This is the spell I think I bring the Lore of Beast for when I'm thinking about spells. It's Wild Form and Curse of Anahir, because it's a Hex, 36-inch range, which is only a 10 to cast, and the target gets -1 to hit.
Amazing. Amazing. Just for that.
Right. That is fantastic, because that's shooting and close combat. So if you needed if you got a big scary shooting unit, no. And if you've got a big scary combat unit that's about to charge, no. And on top of all that, if you want to move, that unit treats all terrain as, other than impassable, of course, as dangerous terrain, and
including open ground.
And you fail dangerous terrain tests on a 1 and 2, not just the 1s, but the 1s and 2s.
So here's the thing. That's amazing control. Maybe they don't want to move after that. So I'm gonna compare it to Fulminating Flame Cage. Fulminating Flame Cage will do more damage to them.
Yes.
But this one just makes them -1 to hit. Now, Fulminating, it makes sense too. Fire focuses on damage. Beast focuses on getting better in close combat.
Yes.
So you want to get into close combat. You want that -1 to hit. See, weirdly enough, a list that wants Lore of Fire would rather have Flame Cage over Curse of Anahir. A list that wants to be in close combat would rather have Curse of Anahir than Fulminating Flame Cage.
100%.
So very similar spells, two different things.
Right.
But same. Okay, we have to talk. I think.
And then we got to talk about the big 6 spell. Which is probably,
some people love it. I think it's like the worst spell in the game.
I think it's probably one of the most disappointing number 6 spells, which I think is a big hindrance to the Lord of Beasts, which again, it's good that Wild Form's so good, so you can always swap this spell out. Transformation of Kadan. Do you want to be a dragon? Do you want to be a monster?
You're a very expensive wizard, or you're only level 2. Transforms into a monster, and then you lose your wizard. It can't cast spells. It's a random play. But any damage the monster takes, the wizard will take if it reverts back to its old form.
Which can be just dispelled because it remains in play.
So you do 3. So say you can upcast it to 20 to cast and become a mountain chimera or a great fire dragon. You're going to do a crazy amount of damage. If that great fire dragon takes 3 wounds, you're level 3. So you're a very expensive level 4 wizard. Your opponent just goes, I'm going to remove that spell. I'm going to throw a bunch of dice. It's gone. You're back to humanoid form. Oh, wait, you've taken 3 wounds. You're dead.
Yes. Just like that.
It's just not great. So Lore of Beasts, I dig it for certain armies. I dig it with, I'm going to try it with Beasts of Chaos, though I'm also going to try Shadow a lot. I really like it with Bretonia, but they can also take Life, which is also a really good one. We'll talk about that later. I really like it with Bretonia. I like it with Lizardmen.
It works well with Empire. I don't think it's the best, but again, it's a nice one to do some utility. Curse of Anahir is just too good to... Right now, we're going to move on to the Lore of Metal!
So Metal is an interesting one because, okay, it has its attribute called Metal Shifting. It doesn't roll to wound. It does a lot of damage, and they're all flaming attacks because it's burning your metal. But whatever your opponent's armor save is, that's what you roll to wound them. So if you have a spell that does D6 damage to the enemy, well, you find out what their armor save is. If it's a 5 armor save, they wound on a 5+. Then you would get no armor save against the spell. Now, if you have a 1-up armor save, you wound them on a 2+ because 1s always fail. But I find that this is one of those lores where it's really useless against some armies, and the armies that you want to use it against, I feel like I'm taking it against them.
Yes, it's tough. Like, there's one thing if you brought this in a tournament setting where you're like, I'm building this with this in mind, whatever. Cool. You're going to play 6 games, cool, whatever. But, like, when you're playing Empire or Dwarves and your opponent's like, I'm bringing Lore of Metal today, and you're like, cool, I guess I'll lose.
This is why you have to jot down your lore beforehand, because this is one of the lores where, like, I'm looking at my opponent's army, I'm taking Lore of Metal.
Yes.
Now, let's look at their signature spell. It's one of their higher cast ones. It is called Searing Doom.
God,
cast on a 10. It's a magic missile, 24-inch range, causes D6 hits, wounding on the armor save of the opponent. No armor saves allowed. Make it a 20 to cast, and it becomes 2d6 hits. I have crippled Steve
Murdered.
Crippled him.
Inner Circle Knights? No chance.
Destroys him. That's what I'm saying. It feels too gimmicky, or not gimmicky, too tailoring against your opponent. Your knights in general, Cav isn't that powerful anymore. And then taking this just like neuters them.
Yeah, so it's against an army of Empire and Dwarves, this lore, crazy. Against vampires, you might as well not have brought a wizard sometimes, because that's kind of what it feels like. Because you got Plague of Rust, which is
counteracts the rest of the lore,
right?
But it's still good.
It doesn't. You kind of got to use this one sparingly, even though you don't think you should, because Plague of Rust is a hex that remains for the rest of the game without being a remains in place, so it can't be dispelled once it goes off.
Permanently damage their armor.
And yeah, you rust their armor, -1 to their armor
Only
save.
this spell, and I think Skaven still have things that permanently affect
so.
you. Yeah,
And
so this spell is...
If you cast it enough times, you can just completely remove somebody's armor, which is cool.
It's good if your opponent has armor, but then I feel like the armor's not a big thing, and you're kind of tailoring.
And you also don't want to put it on your stuff that's got, your opponent's stuff that's got the really high armor, because that's what your Searing Doom is going to hit really well. So it's almost like you're doing it to stuff that's got like a 6-up armor, maybe light armor, just some chaff stuff. I don't know. It feels weird.
Now, the next spell we're talking about for this one is called the Enchanted Blades of Aben. Now, this spell is good whether your opponent has armor or not. It's a solid spell.
+1 to hit.
+1 to hit.
Yeah.
It's the
shooting
24 range
or close combat.
9. But it also gives you armor piercing and magical attacks. Magical attacks is good for ethereal. Armor piercing helps to shave off a little bit of armor. You can send the range. Yeah, you get it. It's all right there. But again, this is if your opponent doesn't have armor, it's not that big a deal.
Yep. You got one that's glitter and roams that can give you scaly skin, which is nice because it can stack.
You can boost your armor, but like we are going to talk about its
big
nuke spell.
I think every lore we're going to talk about the big 6 because we kind of got it. And we've got Final Transmutation, which is a range of 18, and you're going to roll the d6 for every model in the unit. And on a 5-up, it's going to get turned to gold and removed as a casualty with no saves of any kind.
I love the lore of this
because it also makes any other models that start or try to move within 12 inches of it, they have a chance of becoming stupid because they're too busy gawking at the gold.
Look at that gold I can go steal.
Oh, gold!
Models with more than 1 wound only die on a 6.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a 15 to cast. It's not the best nuke spell, but it is lore wise one of the most interesting.
Right. It is the 1 in 3 models in the unit are going to die. So that's nice. It doesn't also affect on the armor saves really. So if you're using this lore against like vampire counts, it can still do something, and you're not gonna just be like, oh wow, you have no armor and it does nothing.
Care about this video. Yeah. So this lore is, it's weak in regards that you're not, if you're playing blindly, you're not gonna pick this lore because you're playing against Wood Elves. It's not gonna help you. You're playing like you're like I don't know. You have to know your opponent. This lore is too good against some opponents and just trash against others.
Yep.
So I rate this one as a fun but mediocre.
It has a lot of
two situations.
You can do a lot of cool theme stuff with it too because of how it plays, and it's very thematic and the metal, and you can get Balthazar Gelt and all that kind of fun stuff. And we're gonna go on to another lore that actually kind of has one of those better against some than other armies, which is the Lore of Light.
Generally a weaker lore. Yeah. But it can be good for some. It's not bad for Lizardmen. The problem with this lore, it's all about buffing and comboing with other spells in its own lore, which is something you don't really want to do in 8th edition. You want to throw a bunch of dice at one big damaging spell or one big spell that just really affects the game. And I don't see it in this one, especially since this is, again, an interesting lore attribute, but it's also a lot of buffing. So it's exorcism. It does anything that does damage will do an extra die worth of damage to anything with undead or demons. So if it does d6 damage against undead and demons, it does 2d6 damage. So looking at their signature spell, it just does light damage.
Shem's Burning Gaze, Magic Missile, range 24, d6 strength 4 hits. That count as flaming. You can extend the range 48, and it boosts it from strength 4 to 6, which is super nice.
Yes, so I like their signature spell because you can boost range and the strength, so it's good against everything. Getting 2d6 strength 6 hits against anything undead is really good. Oh yeah. Getting d6 strength 6 against anything else is just fine. Yep. Especially since its casting value isn't great, though it does go up to 15 for that boosted strength.
I know.
That's a little up there. But it's worth it if you're doing 2d6.
Yes.
But it's a little up there.
And I think maybe that's part of it, how it's costed is with that extra die in mind, that's only going to come up in what? So that's 2 of the armies out of the 15 in the entire game?
Yeah.
So
we'll talk about 3.
You want to talk about Light of Battle?
No, sorry. It's Tomb Kings.
Oh, Tomb Kings 2. Yes. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about where you actually see the Lore of Light is with the Banishment spell. Yeah. It is not even their big spell.
No, it's their number 5, but it is a magic missile, casting value of 10 with range 24, and you're going to take 2d6 hits. The strength is equal of 4 plus all other wizards who know the Lore of Light within 12 inches of the caster. So this is commonly seen in like an Empire build. It's called the Light Council, and you bring a level 4 with 2 level 1s, and then you bring a chariot that it has banishment as an 8 bound spell, so you can cast banishment twice, and the banishment on the chariot with 3 wizards next to it is strength 7, and the banishment on the wizard itself is strength 6. So you can do some crazy stuff with that.
It by itself is fine. I tend to cast it 2, 6, 3, 4s, but if you Empire can really do some things with it.
Yeah, that's the way to kind of push this beyond the traditional boundaries.
Now, there's an interesting spell, Net of Emmentalk, which is
Yep.
really good. Also, I've seen it fail 2 times as well. It's a hex spell where a unit has to take a strength test every time it wants to do something, and if it fails a strength test, it can't do it, like move or cast spells. It can cripple a unit, but also I've seen them, for some reason in my experience, I've just seen them pass that test too often.
Yep.
Nothing in this lore can help you modify their strength, but if you could, this makes it a lot better.
Yeah. If it had something like that, right? But it is casting value of 10 that could 50-50 do nothing. But it does also change the way psychological things can affect the game. So there's that.
So we're going to talk about 3 spells at once, but basically it's going to be the big spell, Barona's Time Warp. It is their number 6 spell. It's a casting value of 12 and augment with a range of 12. A target unit's movement is doubled and it increases attacks by 1 and gains always strikes first until the next wizard's casting phase. Yeah. You can have it become a 24 to cast, affect all units within 12. Now that's actually pretty good, but where it really stacks, what we talked about earlier, is when you mix it with the Speed of Light or the Frost Protection. Frost Protection. Speed of Light can give a unit weapon skill initiative of 10 on a 10 to cast, or you make it every within 12 on a 16 to cast. And then Frost Protection, you can have your unit -1 to hit. So really what you want is, you want all 3 of them.
Yes.
What you really want to get is Speed of Light and Barona's Time Warp off to really buff a combat unit. Now, here's the unfortunate thing about this lore. You have to get 2 spells off. And it can really affect the game if you get 2 of the bubble versions off and charge everything in. Yeah. But the game, the reason why I call this, that's a really, really powerful combo. But I consider this lore weaker because other lores can be, not replicate what this is doing, but it can be as impactful to the game as this with just a single spell.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, Barona's Time Warp is a fantastic spell for only a 12 to cast.
Yeah, I just feel like when you are using it as someone who's used the Lore of Light before, it just feels like it's almost like a win more kind of spell.
It's a Barona's Time Warp, Speed of Light, a Slan can guarantee those 2 spells. Mm-hmm. It's not and I think the lore's best with Empire and Lizardman. I don't know if I really want to with anybody else, because I think anybody else I'd have a better combo.
Yep.
That's my thoughts on the Lore of Light. However, we're going to one of the best lores in the game.
Lore of Life.
Lore of Life, everybody's favorite.
Life Bloom is its lore attribute, which is I think it makes a lot of sense for this one because it's all about healing. So every time you successfully get Lore of Life spell off,
you're gonna keep going.
Anyone within 12 inches or the wizard himself can actually heal a wound. So, just a way to, whether the wizard himself's taken damage from miscasts, heroes taking damage at combat, maybe individual chariots you could heal, like Steam Tank,
your monster, anything you want, your war machine, anything.
It's a nice little ability, and you're going to be trying to cast spells anyway, so it's just incidental extra wounds that you can regain.
Its lore attribute, its signature spell is also a fantastic one.
5-up regen.
Earthblood, who doesn't want that? Now, it's an 8 to cast, it only casts on the wizard's unit.
That's the one downside.
Who cares? It's a signature spell and it's really good.
Yep.
Now, there are other spells in this lore, but we have to talk about the Throne of Vines. The spell. Well, there's 2 of these spells in this one.
But I think that this is the better representatory of the entire thing. We got Throne of Vines.
Throne of Vines is the mini game of Warhammer Magic.
Yes. This is a remains in play. This is probably one of the best remains in play.
So arguably you say it's the first thing you cast, and if your opponent wants to throw dice and stop it, great. And if they don't,
they're going to use dice on their turn to get rid of it, which is going to nullify their magic phase. Because it's got 2 effects. The first one, you ignore miscast on a 2+.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, fantastic.
You can just safely 6 dice spells all you want for the rest of the game.
Well, you know the effects of the miscast. So the Aegis Force still happens, and
Right.
But then it buffs all your other spells. Like, there's a spell that gives you +2 toughness. If you have this up, it gives +4 toughness to your unit.
Nanners.
Amazing. And then, it buffs a couple other spells, but, it's a very defensive and healing lore. with also the ability to heal return wounds to a unit with what's it called? Regrowth. But it also has, strangely, one of the greatest offensive spells in the game.
And not just an offensive, but a offensive nuke spell. Because Dwellers Below, direct damage, range 12, but that's an 18 to cast, but you can boost it for a 21, which you're probably going to do because you'd probably need the 24-inch range.
Probably need that range, yeah.
And every model in the unit has to take a strength test to be slain.
Just slain. No seasoning kind allowed. Slain outright.
Wow.
Lore of Life is one of the best. I know it's hard to say the best, but like a very commonly, maybe overly used lore, because it is clearly the most offensive with the heals, and one of the best nuke spells with Dwellers Below. And with Throne, you don't have to worry about throwing 6 dice at it.
Exactly. Yeah, you can safely 6 cast this spell because it goes off. It automatically ignores the miscast, and then you're safe to cast more spells.
There isn't an army or a faction that can take the Lore of Life, so that I don't often see them taking the Lore of Life.
Right. I think that this was the other one I was talking about when I was talking about good for new players. This one.
If you can take Lore of Life, go ahead and run it. Unless you're trying to tone down a little bit. Like you got High Elves, Lizardmen, Empire, Wood Elves. I feel like there's probably more. But those are the ones that you're going to see Lore of Life. Mm-hmm. Like it's just, you know where you're going to see it.
One of the ones we don't see very often in 8th edition anymore, Lore of Heaven.
No, this used to be one of the best lores in the game in 7th because of Comet of Cassandora, and it's still here, and it's not functionally that different. Its lore attribute is whatever. Anything that does damage will do extra damage to things that fly.
Well, no, any spell that hits a unit with flying, because even if that spell doesn't do damage,
interesting.
It does damage to the unit with flying.
Okay. So any spell you put in a unit, because that will affect Curse of the Midnight Wind.
Right.
Okay. You hit an enemy unit and do a little damage if they have fly. That makes Wind Blast a little bit better. So its signature spell is one of my favorite signature spells.
Ooh, Ice Shard Blizzard?
Yeah, because the reason why I've used this so many times in the past is I play 2 armies that have the ability to have wizards that have all 8 signature spells.
Yeah.
Piles and Lizardmen. So this is when I play Lizardmen with Wandering Liberations, where I get all 8 signature spells. I often cast this spell.
Yeah, this is one of them.
It's not the best spell in this lore, but it's a really effective one. Casting value 7, -1 to hit for unit, and -1 leadership, or you can turn off a cannon on a 4+. This -1 to hit it's a solid signature spell.
And I like how the -1 to hit combos with the -1 leadership, because they're both like, if you are in combat and you win combat, that -1 leadership could be huge, because that's going to be an additional minus to what they're going to lose by. So that, like, I like how that works. The -1 to hit takes wounds away from them and the leadership.
Which is good for fighting steadfast things, right?
Yeah.
Now, this spell does have a couple of spells that do damage.
I mean, there is a do-do.
we have Urnon's Thunderbolt. It is a magic missile with a range of 24, cast on 10. It's D6 strength 6 hits.
I mean, it's a cloud appears above them. Lightning.
As you see, you can extend the range for a little upcast, and there's a bigger version of it called Chain Lightning, which is functionally the same.
Yeah.
It's cast on a 15, and basically after you do the damage, you roll a die on a 3+. You can hit another unit with functionally the same spell.
So it's a 3+, so that's a 66% chance it's going to continue.
Just keep going.
But it's only 6-inch range. That's my problem with it. Is the fact that it's only hopping 6 inches each time.
That's their big nuke spell. Well, no, that's not true. That's their number 6 spell. It just isn't as effective or impactful to the game as it should be. The models count is too big for that to really be that useful.
Yeah, you don't have if you have lots of 5-man squads, something like that is bananas.
Now, here we're talking about something interesting. Comet of Cassandora is really, really good.
We have not cast it in a very long time.
And in 7th edition, when you're casting it, you could just spell it before it gets down. Now you can't. So you can upcast it or not. Basically, you cast it, you pick a marker on the battlefield, and you are summoning a comet. Once you cast that spell, if it's going through, that comet's coming no matter what.
Yeah, it's a remains in play, but it's not, because a remains in play can be dispelled. So you got to just kind of think of it that way.
So then every magic phase, you roll a die, and a 4+, the comet crashes. If you don't roll a 4+, you add another marker to the token that you pick the spot. If you upcast it, you start with 2 tokens, and you add 2 every time. But when it does finally arrive, because you keep rolling the die, when it finally arrives, everything within 2d6 inches gets hit by 2d6 strength 4 hits, plus the number of markers. I've seen this strength 10 numerous times.
Yes.
2d6 strength 10, it just crushes things. Now, it's better than before, but the game isn't the same as it was. Like people aren't relying on this spell as much anymore.
It's tough,
but it is super good if you're playing against dwarves.
Yeah. Any army that wants to hunker down or is building to a strategy to either like come right for you, where you could put it like in the middle of the field or something where they want to go to, or put it in the middle of their deployment zone so you can bomb them while they're sitting there. It's fantastic, but it's so kind of random and can not just come down and just could do nothing the whole game. So
its other 3 spells is Wind Blast. You cast on a 7, you push it in a D3 plus 1 away, maybe do minor amounts of damage. You can upcast it for a little bit more of a push. It's just not that impactful. There are better ways. No, it's just Wind Blast is a terrible spell.
And then they've got Harmonic Convergence and Curse of the Midnight Wind, which are
mirrors
similar.
Themselves, yeah.
Yeah, we've got Harmonic Convergence, which you cast on yourself, and you re-roll to hit to wound and armor saves of 1, where Curse of the Midnight Wind you cast on your opponent's unit, and they re-roll 6s to hit to wound and armor saves. So, kind of whatever. But
now, this lore has a bit of a lack of focus for me. Because you can, when I pick my lore, I'm trying to think what role it's going to do, like what I'm trying to do with my wizard.
Right.
What niche is he trying to fill? What gap is he trying to fill? This one, you can roll 4 dice or whatever level your wizard is and just get a weird combo of things.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit of damage, but you can't guarantee damage. Maybe you get some like buffers and what do you want, nerfers?
Buffers and nerfers?
Buffers and nerfers. Maybe you don't need those. You want to damage, but that's what you rolled.
Yeah, like maybe you get Harmonic Convergence, Wind Blast, Curse, and
but the thing is,
like Thunderbolt.
Wind Blast can even do something. I mean, nothing is terrible. Wind Blast is almost terrible, but nothing is that bad. But you might not get a combo. But like when I want to clear chaff, I'm going to pick Lore of Fire. If I'm going to go ahead, if I want buffing, I'm going to take Lore of Life.
If I want debuffing, I'm going to choose like
right.
that.
Well, we haven't got to them yet, but there are debuffing ones, right? What thing are you thinking? I need to fill this role. I'm going to take Lore of Heavens because every time I've taken Lore of Heavens, it's useful. It's a useful lore. It's just because whatever, I'll try it. I haven't played it in a while.
And then again,
but it has no. It has uses, but no. Focus.
It's got that Rolling Skies, that's lore attribute that's great against high elves. You got a lot of eagles. You got extra damage here and there, but most armies, that's not going to make a difference.
Fireball would probably be better.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Lore of Shadows is up next, and this is my favorite lore.
I think we're getting to the two big boys.
This is a lore that buffs. It debuffs, and kills.
Yes.
It does 2 things. It debuffs you, and it kills you. So it has got one of the best signature spells in the game. My favorite, actually. Malcuss Mystifying Miasma. You just debuff the enemy while reduce their weapon skill, ballistic skill, initiative, or movement by D3. All of those are useful. You can upcast it.
You can choose to. So like whatever you need, you choose it the turn you need it, obviously.
The most common 2 are movement and initiative for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But you can upcast it and reduce all those stats by D3.
And that's cool.
It's my favorite signature spell. Now, its lore attribute isn't that great.
Smoke and mirrors. What a weird thing.
Trade places with another character within 12 after you cast spells. No, I've actually won a game because of that lore attribute where I pulled my Slan teleported out of a close combat unit that I was going to lose combat and die. I was going to lose I needed to save those 500 points.
It's actually within 18.
18? Or another friendly mile within 12.
You're reading life. Boom.
Or anywhere within 18.
Funny how that works, eh?
Yeah, so lore attribute.
I really don't think the extra 6 inches makes that big of a difference.
Now, it does have 2 spells that are debuffing. It is the Enfeebling Foe and the Withering. They are both remains in play hexes with a range of 18. So this one here is cast on a 10 and reduces strength by D3. That's pretty good. The other one reduces toughness by D3, but it's a little harder to cast.
I look at this one.
That's so good.
This one's pretty much like D3 plus D3 to wound.
Like I played
wild.
Like big old blocks of Seaguard.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of bows on a unit with only toughness 1.
Oh yeah.
I love those 2 spells. But they also have one of my favorite nuke spells in the game. Is called the Pit of Shades.
Pit.
It is a 14 to cast, and it's a small round template that scatters D6, and every model hit by that template takes an initiative test and gets removed from play.
Sorry, or they're dragged to their
They
doom.
fall into the Pit of Shades.
Dragged to their doom.
Now, okay, that's amazing, right? It'll destroy ogres as long as they don't have that banner. It'll destroy dwarves. It'll destroy all forms of undead. but it'll destroy anything, including elves, when you factor in the signature spell, Melkoth's Mystify Miasma, of reducing things.
Minus that initiative by D3?
Bananas. Bananas. So, okay, and then they have their big spell. It's called Occam's Mind Razor. It is widely one of the most feared spells in the games, especially with elves. High elves love Lore of Shadow.
You pretty much get to swap your leadership with your strength. So you want strength 9, you want strength 7, you want strength 8. Like, it is great.
Like, I mean, look at even crappy goblins have leadership 5 or 6. That's a huge buff. But like the lowest human leadership is 7.
I guess you put this on a unit of halberdiers, that's strength 8. Because they still get +1. Like, it's cool. Like that is. Now, is it a win more? Maybe.
Well, it can take a unit that's going to lose combat and completely and utterly destroy them or win with them. Because I'm thinking about just High Elf Spearmen always strikes first. 50 attacks.
Yeah, I think, but I don't think that
wounded on 2.
You can't count always strikes first as a normal rule, though.
It's in most of my games. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, because you're an asshat. What? Sorry.
So Lore of Shadows. No, Lore of Shadows.
Okay.
One of my favorite lores.
Yeah.
I don't third best if I were to rank them. I can't really rank them because Lore of Life, Lore of Shadows. But we will talk about definitely the most powerful lore. Now, many of us here, when we play, we just don't use this lore. We just genuinely agree to not use it.
Because part of it is its lore attribute, which is probably the best lore attribute in all these spells.
It has arguably like 2 of the best spells in the game and a crazy bananas lore attribute.
Because this lore attribute, whenever you deal a wound with any of the spells from the Lore of Death, you get to roll a die, and on a 5 or 6, you get another magic die in your power pool. Like, so you could do. There are some spells on here that can do lots of damage, but even if you do 4 wounds, you roll 4 dice every 5 or 6, you get an extra die back. So the ability to do damage, regain, and just keep feeding the loops of wizards, and the fact that your Lore of Death wizard can use all of your dice you have, kill a bunch of stuff, regain a bunch of dice back, so your other wizards can then cast more spells.
Honestly, it's too good. It's too good. There's a reason why we don't use it.
Because that is just like the icing on the cake that makes all of the other spells just that much better. Because Spirit Leech is a signature.
It's okay. It's not a bad signature, but it's not an amazing signature, but it's also a game-winning signature. You just try to assassinate a character. Mm-hmm. Now, it says unmodified leadership if you read the card. It has been FAQ'd so that you can use your General's Inspiring Presence leadership. Right. But there are other spells in this lore called Doom and Darkness that removes 3 from somebody's leadership. That's amazing for Steadfast. Like, I don't know, like, if I use it against Skaven, they're just done. So let's say, hey, I should take a look at that.
Yeah, like that's like I can't let that go off. But Spirit Leech, but it'll make your opponent sweat. Like that's what it'll do.
If you mix that with Doom and Darkness, you can put that on their general. So their General's Inspiring Presence probably isn't going to be impactful. Yep. And then Spirit Leech could just like assassinate a character. But they also have 2 other spells that could do that. Caress of Lyneth and Fate of Buna. Basically, you roll 2d6, and one of them is minus their strength. And then does damage on a roll, and then 1 minus toughness and does damage after a roll. Yep. It can just assassinate things, including monsters. Right. But that's not why you take the lore. There are 2 amazing spells in this game for lore.
The probably most like the easiest to cast one, you get Soul Blight. Just straight up -1 strength toughness. You like Malkoth's Mystify Miasma? Or sorry,
Enfeebling Foe or...
No, Wild Form. It's the opposite of Wild Form.
Yeah, well, it's Enfeebling Foe or Withering. It's only one. So, okay, it is a 24-inch range, pick a unit, 9 to cast, -1 strength and toughness. Bam. Amazing. Or you can make it an 18 to cast, and only an 18 to cast, and every unit within 24.
24
is -1 strength and toughness. That's a 4-foot circle of -1 strength and toughness. That is a 4-foot circle of I win combat.
That's 4-foot circle on a 6-foot
and it's like hex. Like, you're not going to get to remove it on your next turn. You're fighting 2 rounds with it.
Yeah, it's whew. And not only that, but you also get a spell so well known. They made a model. They made a model for the Purple Sun of Xerxes for AOS.
It is a magical vortex. Well, the magical vortex rules, we don't have to go over those. It's going to shoot on forward on a 15 to cast, small round template, 25 to cast for a large round template. Throw 6 dice, throw the large round template. miscast, lose d6 dice, kill a bunch of mauls and gain a bunch more dice back.
This is where that lore attribute.
You just remove. So you just you hit a bunch of mauls. They all do initiative tests or get removed from play. Now, if you hit an ogre and you kill an ogre, that's 3 wounds. You roll 3 dice per ogre you removed for the lore attribute to get dice back. Now, you mix this with another wizard with, say, Mystifying Miasma, a lore initiative, bananas.
Oh.
So this spell is why ogres aren't, in my opinion, the best of the game, because this spell hard counters ogres. So ogres have a couple of great magic items, the Hellheart, whatever, but that banner that makes you untargetable, this don't target Jack. You place a template and you send it right through.
Zoom!
And this is ogres just lost.
Yes.
This is a dwarfs just lost.
Yep.
This is a Tomb Kings just lost. This is devastating to the dwarves and devastating to ogres. Like it's
vampires. It does a lot too as well.
It does. It's just too good of a spell, especially combined with the lore attribute. So the lore of death is a lore that can assassinate, wipe out entire units, modify that leadership for like that steadfast nonsense. Oh my god, that's so good. I didn't consider that one ever.
Regain you dice,
and has a disgustingly powerful debuff with a 24-inch range radius of -1 strength and toughness. So clearly the best lore, and the reason why we don't often use it.
Yep.
Now, so there you go, guys. There is the magic. I can say what's the best. I can say what's best. I think it's death. I can say what my favorite is at Shadow. I can say what's super useful. Most of them. I can say ones that are a little bit lackluster to me. That's Light and Heavens.
I think that those, if we had to put some at the bottom, probably those being the.
But I mean, if you spend enough time, you can go and wait for the comments that somebody can give you a valid reason why Light is so amazing. And I'm not saying you're wrong.
No.
Like I don't know if we mentioned yet in this video. If we did this review 5 years ago, we would be saying different things.
Right.
Because we are seeing the utilitarian value. Like for example, Lore of Fire. I had nothing good to say about Lore of Fire years ago, but lots of damage and fulminating flame cage, and everything's low to cast. It is a solid, reliable lore.
Right, and I think there's just something about all of these different spells that you can bring the same list. And if you have access to all 6 of these different lords, that is 6 completely different armies, essentially, because it'll make them play so much differently.
Dead on right, dude. So if you want to play a big Empire army, or even High Elf armies that can do it, or Lizard armies that can do it, you're going to play defensively with the Lore of Life, or you can just change it completely and go all offense with the Lore of Beasts.
Right.
Or you can focus on table control with Shadow or Fire.
Potentially Heavens in there.
Or even Heavens. Like, it can change the way you're going to play and make decisions. Like, if you can master these lores, which nobody can, like, we've been doing it for years, whatever, right? If you can master these lores, it can just change the way you play. I mean, it'd be fun to just do a series of bat rips where we both use the exact same lists for 8 games, but we go through the 8 different lores to see how our decisions change.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a unit in a different spot depending on what spells I have.
Every single time. It's so different, and I think this is just one of the many reasons why Fantasy is such a wonderful game. No, you get access to all these wonderful things.
A little bit of criticism, though. Magic is also one of the things that people have been most critical of for 8th edition. There's a bunch of these nuke spells that you can win the game in the Magic phase, which not a lot of people like. The lores that are a little more utilitarian are far more balanced. But I mean, one Purple Sun, one Pit of Shades, one whatever ends the game. That's not how you want the game to end, but that is a downside to the Magic. Sometimes it's too effective, which I think is arguably better than Magic being ineffective at all. Because we've had editions where Magic was just kind of garbage.
Yeah.
At least now we recognize what's like too good, like death, so we just don't do it.
Yep. Yeah. No. And with all these kind of big nuke spells, with the way that 8th edition went and pushing into the hordes, obviously, like that skew means all of these big nuke spells just do that much more damage.
Without them though. Without Pit of Shades, without even Dwellers Below, what would take on some of these Death Star units, right?
Exactly.
We need it's the arms race. Death Stars, nuke spells.
Yeah.
Like you take away one, yeah. Any other thoughts on Magic?
It's a crazy part of Warhammer Fantasy, and you either love it or you hate it.
What's your favorite lore?
If I had to choose a single lore,
I'm gonna say he's gonna say Life. Or the lore of Plague.
I mean, yeah, like, okay. I mean,
No, but out of these 8.
I was gonna say, if I had to choose a lore, it's the lore of Ruin.
No, lore of Dark Magic.
Probably out of here.
Out of here? Yeah. No, lore of Shadows is mine.
I think I would have.
Lore of Shadows is mine.
If you would have went back about a year, I probably definitely would have said Life.
Yep.
I've been recently just enjoying playing with beasts.
Okay.
But I think after going through this, I'm going to try playing with a little bit more Heavens, just for fun.
Yeah, I've done that recently. I like Shadow and then Fire nowadays. But there you go, guys. There is Magic in 8th edition. Not a bad part of the game, but some people hate it. Whatever, guys. I love it. I don't know. You love it too. I know.
I mean, it's a huge part of the game, and it's just part of Warhammer Fantasy.
Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more reviews coming up next week.
See you.
Happy Wargaming.